When I first moved into the peaceful cul-de-sac of Willow Creek, I thought I had finally found a safe haven for my little girl, Emma. After years of hospital shifts, sleepless nights, and the crushing loneliness that came with raising a child alone, the neat lawns, white fences, and polite smiles of the neighborhood felt like the fresh start we deserved. I was a pediatrician, someone who dedicated her entire life to protecting children. So, when the HOA president, a sharply dressed woman named Karen Whitmore, welcomed me with a clipboard and a too-tight smile, I didn't see the warning signs. She seemed perfectly composed, the kind of woman who never missed a manicure, who measured her worth in blooming roses and gossip whispers. "We keep things orderly here, Dr. Hale," she told me that first day, her tone clipped and precise, eyes flicking over my scuffed moving boxes and Emma's squealing laughter, as if joy itself were a stain on her perfection. I laughed it off. I was too tired to notice the chill in her politeness. The first few weeks passed easily enough, neighbors waving, children biking past our porch, Emma's giggles echoing through the yard. But then the notices started coming. Small things at first. Your trash can was an inch from the curb. Your stroller blocks the sidewalk. Baby toys should not be visible from the street. Every message bore Karen's neat, slanted signature, as if she took pleasure in policing even the rhythm of our breathing. I tried to stay calm, telling myself she just cared about the community, but one evening when I came home from a late shift at the hospital, I found Emma's baby bottles lying neatly on the porch rail, each one uncapped and a note pinned beside them. "You left these outside, very unhygienic." My stomach twisted. I had never left them outside. My mother's instinct prickled beneath my skin like static. I glanced at Karen's porch across the street. Her curtains shifted slightly before falling still. The next morning, she was trimming her roses and smiled as if nothing had happened. "You really should be more careful with a child that small," she said sweetly. "This neighborhood isn't what it used to be." There was something in her tone that made the air feel heavy. That night, Emma cried uncontrollably. No fever, no rash, just piercing wails that tore through the walls until I felt my sanity cracking. I checked her formula, her bottle, everything, nothing seemed off. But when I brought the nipple to my nose, there was a faint, bitter scent beneath the milk, something sharp and sterile, like the disinfectant I used at work. I froze. My mind told me I was overreacting, sleep-deprived, paranoid, but my gut screamed otherwise. I threw the milk out and made a fresh bottle. Emma settled, finally sleeping in my arms, her tiny chest rising and falling like fragile glass. I should have gone to the police right then, but who would believe me? A pediatrician accusing the HOA president of tampering with baby milk would sound insane. Still, something had changed. From that day on, Karen's eyes followed me everywhere. At the mailbox, on the porch, in the reflection of her kitchen window. She began offering to help with Emma, always lingering a little too long when she peeked into the stroller. "You work such long hours," she'd say, voice dripping with false sympathy. "You must be exhausted. Let me watch her sometime." I declined every time, forcing a polite smile. One afternoon, I caught her near my doorstep again. She held a bottle of hand sanitizer, rubbing her palms as she admired her flowers. When she saw me, she smiled wider than ever. "Cleanliness is next to godliness, dear," she said. I wanted to believe it was innocent, but my instincts told me otherwise. A few nights later, after a long hospital shift, I came home to find the back door unlocked. I was sure I'd bolted it. Everything looked untouched, except the counter where Emma's sterilized bottles sat drying. One had fallen over, its nipple missing. My hands trembled as I searched the floor, and when I finally found it under the cabinet, it smelled faintly of alcohol. That sharp, clinical scent again. My heart pounded so violently I thought I'd faint. I rushed upstairs, scooped Emma from her crib, and clutched her against my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, lights off, watching Karen's house. Around 2 a.m., her porch light flicked on, and I saw her step out in a robe, looking straight toward my window before turning back inside. No smile this time, just a cold, knowing stare that sent shivers crawling down my spine. I told myself I was imagining it, that stress was twisting my mind, but deep down, something inside me had already broken. I started taking Emma to work with me, keeping her in the nursery unit when I could. I bought new locks, cameras, even switched brands of formula. But paranoia can't erase fear, it only feeds it. One morning, when I stepped outside to leave for the hospital, I found a small gift basket on the porch. Inside were baby wipes, lotion, and my stomach dropped, a new bottle of hand sanitizer. The note read, "To help you stay clean for your patients. Karen." My hands shook as I stared at it, the early sun catching the plastic and making it gleam like a weapon. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled for the camera. I knew she had trained on my porch, waved politely, and carried the basket inside. That was the moment I realized the truth. Karen wasn't just meddling. She was watching, testing, pushing boundaries to see how far she could go. And the worst part, I had no idea what she'd already done, or how close she had come to hurting the one thing I loved more than my own life. The next few days blurred into a haze of forced smiles and sleepless nights, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a threat. I started noticing things, small, almost invisible details that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. My front gate, which I always kept latched, began swinging open in the mornings. My trash cans were rearranged, the lid of the recycling bin half open like someone had rummaged through it. Each time, I convinced myself it was coincidence, wind, or kids playing around, but deep down, my instinct screamed one name: Karen. I tried to confront her casually, pretending to make small talk, while my hands shook around the stroller handle. She smiled like she'd practiced it in a mirror, eyes cold and empty beneath layers of politeness. "Everything okay, dear?" she asked, her voice dripping with concern. "You've been looking so tired lately. Babies can drain you, can't they?" Her words felt like knives hidden in honey. I wanted to ask if she'd been near my house, if she knew anything about the sanitizer smell, but the way she leaned closer, too close, her perfume mixing with that same sharp alcohol scent, made my throat close up. I muttered an excuse and walked away, my skin crawling. That night, I set up one of the clinic's portable monitors near Emma's crib, something small, discreet, a motion detector that would alert my phone. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, but peace doesn't exist when paranoia becomes your shadow. Around midnight, the monitor buzzed. My phone screen lit up with static, then a faint shape, someone standing near the back door, moving slowly as if testing the lock. I bolted upright, adrenaline slamming through me. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the dresser and crept downstairs, every step a drumbeat in my ears. By the time I reached the door, the shape was gone. I opened it carefully, the night air sharp and cold against my face. Nothing, just the faint scent of roses drifting from Karen's garden. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I checked the footage again, frame by frame. The person had worn a robe, hair tied up, moving gracefully like a woman. But the face was hidden under the porch light's shadow. I felt sick. I couldn't go to the police with this. It was too vague. So I did what I knew best. I went clinical. I collected every bottle in the house, swabbed them with sterile cotton, sealed the samples in vials, and ran quick tests in the pediatric lab after hours. I wasn't expecting much, but when I saw the faint trace of ethanol and isopropyl residue in one of the bottles, my stomach dropped. It wasn't enough to be lethal, but it was there. Someone had mixed sanitizer into my baby's milk. I sat alone in the lab, staring at the numbers, my hands trembling so hard the vials rattled on the table. I wanted to vomit, scream, destroy something, but instead I whispered Emma's name and swore under my breath that I'd find out who did it. That evening, I installed hidden cameras, tiny ones disguised as air fresheners and nursery decorations. I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers, not the HOA, not even the sweet old neighbor who sometimes brought me cookies. I trusted no one now. The next day, Karen showed up at my door holding a tray of lemon bars. "I thought you might need a treat," she chirped, eyes darting toward Emma's stroller. I forced a smile and thanked her, all while my pulse thundered in my ears. When she left, I didn't touch the lemon bars. I threw them straight in the trash, then replayed her visit on the hidden camera footage that night. And that's when I saw it, barely noticeable, just a flick of her hand when I turned to set Emma down. She'd brushed her fingers against the baby's bottle on the counter. My chest tightened. I zoomed in. Her expression didn't change. She smiled through the whole thing. I felt tears sting my eyes, part horror, part rage. I could almost hear her thoughts. Cleanliness is next to godliness. She thought she was untouchable. I needed proof that no one could deny. Over the next few days, I staged everything. I made a fake bottle filled with harmless saline and a traceable dye compound, a safe but detectable chemical marker. I placed it where she could see it whenever she dropped by. I told myself if she touched it again, I'd know. I'd finally know. And then, just as the trap was set, Emma fell sick again. It started with soft whimpers, then escalated into heart-wrenching cries. She refused her milk, her tiny hands trembling. Panic clawed through me. I rushed her to the hospital, my colleagues running tests while I stood there, paralyzed between mother and doctor. The results came back clear: no infection, no bacteria, no virus. But the chemical analysis hinted at traces of ethanol again. That night, as I sat beside her crib in the hospital room, I realized I was fighting something darker than jealousy or control. This wasn't about HOA rules anymore. Karen wanted power. She wanted submission. And she was willing to hurt a baby to get it. I stared at Emma's sleeping face, her lips dry, her cheeks pale, and something inside me snapped, not in fear, but in resolve. When we returned home, I smiled at Karen the same way she smiled at me. She waved, oblivious. I spent the next evening cleaning the kitchen spotless, pretending to hum along to music, the fake bottle glinting innocently on the counter. I even left the back door unlocked, just slightly. My phone camera was recording everything. I tucked Emma into her crib and whispered, "It's almost over, sweetheart." That night, when the monitor buzzed again, I didn't move. I watched in silence as a figure entered through the door, robe flowing, hands gloved, moving with eerie calm. She reached for the bottle, my bottle, and poured something from her pocket into it. Then, as she adjusted the cap, the porch light flicked on, catching her face for a split second. Karen, the woman who'd smiled, who'd preached about cleanliness and safety, who'd waved from her perfect porch. My throat closed. The proof was there. But somehow that made it worse. Because now, I knew the monster next door wasn't imaginary. She was real, deliberate, and standing just a few feet from where my baby slept. When I replayed the footage that night, my hands were trembling so violently, I almost dropped the phone. There she was, Karen Whitmore, the self-proclaimed queen of Willow Creek, moving through my kitchen like she owned it, her every motion calm, calculated, and terrifyingly familiar. She had done this before. She knew exactly where everything was. She reached for the bottle, twisted the cap, poured something clear and thick from her pocket into the milk, then wiped the rim with a cloth, as if to erase her sin. The entire act took less than 20 seconds, a crime wrapped in elegance. I sat there in silence for a long time, my mind trying to catch up with what my eyes had already accepted. My baby's cries, the bitter scent, the faint alcohol traces. It all made horrifying sense now. My first instinct was to call the police, but something inside me stopped. Evidence or not, she was an HOA president with influence, friends in every committee, a manipulator who knew how to twist narratives. She'd claim I was an unstable single mother, overworked, delusional. No, I needed more. I needed a trap she couldn't wriggle out of. The next morning, I went to work as if nothing had happened. My colleagues noticed the dark circles under my eyes, but I brushed it off. Between patients, I quietly sent the footage to a trusted contact in the lab, asking for a chemical cross-check on the residue left in the bottle. If they could match it to any sanitizer brand, I'd have a definitive link. That evening, I saw Karen pruning her flowers again, humming under her breath. When she noticed me, she waved with that same soulless smile. "Everything all right, doctor?" she asked. "I saw the police car last night near your house. Hope nothing serious?" My blood went cold. There hadn't been any police cars. She was probing, testing to see if I'd react. I didn't blink. "Everything's fine, Karen," I said, forcing a calmness that didn't exist. "Emma's feeling better. Thank you for asking." She tilted her head, studying me like a cat studies a trapped bird. "Good. We all have to keep things clean around here." The word clean hung in the air like poison. That night, I added another camera, hidden behind the vent above the kitchen, angled perfectly at the counter. I replaced the bottle with another decoy, this time infused with a trace chemical visible only under UV light. The plan was simple. If she touched it again, the residue would mark her hands, glowing bright blue under blacklight. I waited for 2 days, nerves stretched like wire. Then, on the third night, the monitor pinged again. My phone buzzed, screen lighting up with movement alerts. I didn't need to look, I knew who it was, but I watched anyway. Karen crept in through the same door, same robe, same calm rhythm. She reached for the bottle, twisted it, then poured something again. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. When she left, I didn't chase. Not yet. The next morning, I waited outside as she came to collect her mail. "Morning, Karen," I said cheerfully. "Lovely day, isn't it?" She smiled. "Beautiful, yes?" But her right hand, the one holding the mail, had faint, blue smudges along the palm and fingers. My stomach flipped. I wanted to shout it to the world, drag her out into the street, and make her confess, but I held it in. Instead, I turned away and whispered, "Got you?" I sent the footage, the chemical reports, and the new photos to my contact at the lab. Within hours, he confirmed everything. The sanitizer matched the exact brand Karen used, the same one she'd left in the gift basket weeks earlier. I finally had irrefutable proof. Still, I didn't want to just hand it to the police. I wanted her to feel what she'd done. I wanted her mask to crumble publicly where her control meant nothing. So, I waited until the next HOA meeting, a perfect stage for her downfall. I arrived early, baby monitor tucked in my bag, laptop ready with the footage queued up. Karen stood at the front, clipboard in hand, her pearls glinting under the lights as she lectured the neighborhood about community hygiene. I waited until she said the word cleanliness again, then I stood up. "You want to talk about hygiene, Karen?" I said, voice steady but loud enough to silence the room. "Then, maybe we should discuss what's been happening in my kitchen." Her face froze. "Excuse me," she said, laugh trembling at the edges. I walked forward, eyes locked on hers. "You broke into my house. You poisoned my baby's milk. You've been watching us for weeks." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen turned red, then pale. "That's absurd," she snapped. "This woman's delusional. She's been unstable ever since she moved here." I didn't reply. I pressed play. The footage flickered onto the projector screen. Karen, clearly visible, standing in my kitchen, pouring sanitizer into the bottle. The room erupted. Neighbors shouted, people recoiled, a few mothers covered their mouths. Karen's scream cut through the chaos, a shrill, panicked sound as she lunged forward. "That's fake. She edited that. She's trying to ruin me." But the evidence was undeniable. The glow on her hands, the timestamps, the chemical analysis I handed to the police officer I'd invited quietly to the meeting. His eyes met mine and he nodded. 2 uniformed officers stepped forward. Karen stumbled back, tears streaking her makeup, hands shaking as she tried to maintain her composure. "You don't understand," she whimpered. "I was only trying to keep things sanitary. She's a doctor. She should appreciate cleanliness." Her words dissolved into incoherent babbling as they handcuffed her. I should have felt triumphant, but as they led her past me, she looked up with a stare that chilled me to the bone. "You think you're safe now?" she hissed. "You have no idea how deep this goes." And in that moment, I realized the truth. The terror wasn't over. Because people like Karen didn't act alone. Someone had given her that sense of untouchable power, and I intended to find out who. The trial was supposed to bring closure, but nothing about it felt like justice at first. Weeks passed between hearings, each day a reminder that people like Karen didn't just vanish quietly. They fought, they manipulated, they tried to twist reality until you doubted your own memory. She pleaded not guilty, claiming I'd fabricated the footage, that the chemicals found in my home were planted by a jealous neighbor. Her lawyer painted me as an exhausted single mother, overworked, paranoid, suffering from postpartum anxiety. I sat in the courtroom, jaw clenched, fingers trembling in my lap as he spoke about me like I wasn't even human, like my pain was an inconvenience to his narrative. But what he didn't understand was that I'd spent my entire career reading the smallest details: heartbeats, reflexes, signs of distress invisible to untrained eyes. And I could see the truth in Karen's every flinch, every dart of her gaze when evidence was mentioned. When my turn came to testify, I stood, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm a pediatrician," I said, voice quiet but firm. "My life's work is protecting children. I have no reason to invent a story like this, but I have every reason to stop a woman who thinks she can hurt a child and call it cleanliness." I presented the lab reports, the chemical analysis, and the camera footage, the blue dye still glowing faintly on Karen's hands, even under the harsh courtroom lights. There was silence, broken only by her sharp inhale. Her mask cracked. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, raw and human. The jury watched the footage without blinking. When the verdict came, guilty of attempted poisoning, trespassing, and child endangerment, she didn't cry. She just stared at me, lips curled in that same bitter smile, as if she still believed she was the victim. I should have felt relief, but I only felt tired, so deeply tired that even breathing seemed like work. It wasn't until a week later, when I was rocking Emma to sleep, that the weight finally lifted. She was healthy again, her cheeks warm, her laughter soft and real. For the first time in months, I slept through the night, but peace didn't mean forgetting. I still walked past Karen's house, sometimes now boarded up and lifeless, the roses wilted into brown husks. The HOA had disbanded. Neighbors no longer whispered about lawn lengths or mailbox heights. The perfect community had rotted from the inside, and everyone finally saw it. One morning, I received a letter, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, typed neatly, "You think it's over." She wasn't the only one. My heart froze, but instead of fear, I felt something else, clarity. I knew now that people like Karen fed on silence, on intimidation, and I had no intention of being silent anymore. I turned the note over to the police, then wrote a full report for the state medical board about the psychological manipulation tactics I'd seen in suburban HOA environments. My story spread farther than I expected. Parents reached out, mothers confided their fears, and victims of neighborhood bullying found courage to speak. I didn't set out to become a symbol of defiance, but sometimes survival demands it. Months later, I returned to the hospital full-time, Emma toddling beside me on her chubby legs. My coworkers greeted me with smiles, but I noticed the way they looked at me differently now, with a mix of respect and awe. They knew what it meant to confront evil in its quietest form. One afternoon, during a routine checkup, I met a young mother with eyes full of exhaustion and fear. Her baby wouldn't stop crying, and she whispered that her neighbor had been helping too much, insisting on cleaning her bottles. My chest tightened. I offered her a gentle smile and said, "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." When she left, I sat alone in the exam room, staring at the sunlight spilling through the blinds, realizing how fragile safety really is. You can move into the nicest neighborhoods, build the whitest fences, and still find monsters living next door. They hide behind rules, titles, and smiles, using order to disguise cruelty. But sometimes they forget that the people they target are stronger than they seem. As for Karen, she never apologized. During her sentencing, she glared at me one last time and muttered, "You ruined my life." I looked her in the eye and whispered, "No, Karen, you ruined it yourself the moment you touched my baby's bottle." She turned away, and I watched her be let out in chains, her pristine nails chipped, her composure shattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, their microphones thrust toward me, asking how I'd known what she was doing. I smiled faintly and said the only truth that mattered, because I'm a doctor and a mother, and mothers always know, That night, after putting Emma to bed, I walked out onto the porch, the same spot where it had all begun. The air was cool, peaceful, the neighborhood quiet again. I could almost hear her voice in the wind, that shrill tone about cleanliness and order. But it faded quickly, replaced by the soft hum of crickets. I sat down, holding a cup of tea, watching the stars flicker above the dark rooftops. My heart was scarred but steady. The nightmare was over, and the silence no longer scared me. I leaned back and whispered to the empty street, "You picked the wrong mother, Karen." And somewhere deep inside, I knew that if another monster ever tried to crawl out from behind a perfect smile, I'd be ready, not just as a doctor, but as the woman who learned that evil doesn't always come with blood and screams. Sometimes it comes with roses, rules, and sanitizer.